Hello everyone. In this study, I will talk about how we could predict the future of climate change responses in aquatic ecosystems. And one good way we could do it is using data from artificially heated water systems, such as various reservoirs used to cool power plants. This is research that has been happening for a long time at Nature Research Center with the leading input from Vytautas Rakauskas, Andrius Steponenas, and Vytautas Kesminas. So you probably have heard that as climate warms, fish are expected to get smaller. We have heard that declining body sizes is a third universal response to warming, and that shrinking of fishes will be seen in various ecosystems, in marine and freshwater aquatic ecosystems. And indeed, when we look at various reviews of commercially exploited species, we often find that over the last 30 to 50 years, the adult length or maximum length has decreased by about 10 to 20%. And in many stocks, fish are maturing earlier. But there are some problems with these reviews in that these data sets come from commercially exploited species. That's where we have data from. And it is very hard to separate the effects of temperature and effects of fishing. So recently, we conducted a different study where we looked at all species in a marine ecosystem, but this time using underwater visual surveys from a large volunteer-based study in Reef Life Survey. And so we looked at tens of thousands of underwater surveys and at over 300 species. And we found that when we actually look at an average body size in a population, temperature does have a very big effect on the body size, but not all species shrink with warming. An average body size in many species actually gets bigger at warmer temperatures. When we talk about fish body size, there is actually quite a lot of confusion in literature and research. What do we actually mean when we say that fish is going to get smaller in warmer temperatures? Because there are different definitions of body size. Are we talking about the maximum body size that the fish can get? The pike perch, are we talking about the average body size in a population, which is very different from a maximum body size, and the average body size will depend on growth and on mortality? Are we talking about size as at a specific age? Specifically, we would be talking about growth. And sometimes some other studies are actually talking about adult size, which presumably means size at maturation, because that's where fish become adults. In this presentation, I'm talking about growth, so it means that we're talking about size at a specific age. However, even when talking about growth or specific size at age, it's also not clear which age are we talking about, because the prediction from temperature size rule is that as temperatures warm, juveniles actually grow faster. They mature at earlier ages and smaller sizes, and they reach smaller maximum body size. So if we look at the adult size or maximum body size, we will say fish are getting smaller. But actually, if we look at the juvenile growth, which is also done in some studies, we will say fish is growing faster. They actually are getting bigger. And another challenge with experiments is that are these experimental results that confirm, that show this temperature size rule, are they really relevant in wild ecosystems? Because like we have conducted the experiment recently with zebrafish in Australia, and this is how it looks. So the fish have controlled feeding levels, they have no predation, no environmental stochasticity, perhaps less competition. This is very different from what it actually looks in real ecosystems, where there are predators, where there is a lot of other fish, or for example, like in this Great Lakes poster with gigantic predators. I hope the Great Lakes look like that also now. So we clearly need field data on climate change experiments. But we also have some accidental or inadvertent experiments. One of them has been conducted in Lithuania, where a large nuclear power plant has been built on a large lake. And so this lake, Drūkšė Lake, is actually a unique experimental system because it's quite large, 45 square kilometers, with a maximum depth of 33 meters, and it was oligotrophic. Now it became slightly more eutrophic. You can see the nuclear power plant here in the background. And the power plant started in 1983, and since its operation, the temperature of the entire lake, actually surface temperature mostly here, started rising. When 2 reactors were working from 1988 to 2004, the temperature of this big lake has increased by 2.5 degrees, and then only 1 reactor was left, and the temperature started going down, and from 2009, when the power plant was closed, the temperature returned back to ambient. So we sort of have this graph of temperature changes where we can see how fish have responded to changes in temperature during heating, but also after the heating. And we also have quite a lot of data from this lake where regular gill netting surveys have been conducted for the last 4 years. Not everything was very clearly written. There was quite a lot of digging into old journals and scales, which we are still finalizing. So aging was based on scales, and we have data from species, total and standard length, age, year, and month. So here we will focus on 4 species: vendus, roach, pike, perch, very common species. And we will use mixed effect models to look whether length responds to temperature. So we have 3 models of increasing complexity. In the first one, we say that length depends on age. Of course, that's natural. But then we say whether temperature has also effect. We're asking in model 1 whether temperature has an effect. So the temperature can have a similar effect across all ages. Or in model 2, we're asking whether there is an interaction between age and temperature so that different ages respond to temperature differently, size at different ages. And in these mixed effect models, we have fixed effects, which is the effects we want to estimate and we are interested in them. And we have random effects, so the effects that we want to account for, because the species were collected, samples were collected at different times of the year, so we need to account for the month, slight variation in size across month, and across years, random variation across years. We also have a different approach where instead of temperature, we are using stage. So we want to know whether there was a difference before heating, during heating, when the maximum temperature changes happened, and also after. So what do we actually get? So if we look at perch, for example, we find something like the best model has age and temperature interaction, and we find that at colder temperatures, perch were bigger. So yes, they are getting smaller with heating. However, it's not entirely temperature size rule because both juveniles and adults are getting smaller with heating. And also we find that before heating, perch were big. Then as the temperatures got warmer, they became smaller. And now that the temperatures return back to ambient, they're actually, again, slightly bigger. So there is a bit of recovery, although it's not really full recovery. Then we look to vendus, which is a cold water species. It's fairly short-lived, so we have less data to actually see these changes in growth. But here we see a fairly nice expected temperature size rule response, where as temperatures warm, small individuals grow faster, the juveniles grow faster, but as the large individuals actually get smaller at warmer temperatures. These are, by the way, predicted responses from mixed model effects. We get the predicted sizes with the uncertainty around the sizes. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have enough data yet from before heating, but basically during heating and after heating, we don't really find big differences in size at age, so there is no evidence that much recovery in size at age has actually happened since the closure of the nuclear power plant. Then the next species is roach. It's a very common species. We have larger sample sizes for this, almost 4,000 individuals. And this species is fairly long-lived. They lived up to, in our samples, up to 18 years. And here again, the best model includes age and temperature interaction. But we get an opposite temperature size rule response. Basically, we find that as the temperatures warm, juveniles grow slower, but adults get bigger. So that's actually quite strange, but this is quite a strong effect here. And we also find something also strange is that before heating, fish were smaller, during heating they got bigger, but actually once the heating stopped, they still got even bigger. So it's quite possible that the main driver here is not even temperature. And even though we try to account for year or month in the random effects, there are other factors that happened during this time that might have had a big effect on roach, which we might need to include in the final analysis, such as invasion of dry zona mussels, which probably provided very abundant food source for roach, and that might have increased the growth rates massively. And finally, we have pike, for example, where we actually don't see any temperature effect on growth. So the best model only includes age. So in fact, we can have a model like this. There is no significant difference across temperatures, and there is no, therefore, much difference across stages. So this species doesn't seem to have responded to changes at all. So basically, what we would conclude is that it seems that in real ecosystems where we have these complex species and environmental interactions, it is very hard to make universal predictions about species responses to temperature. That's actually what we found in this Australian study, where we found that some species are getting bigger when warmer on average. In the Australian study, we were looking at average body sizes, not growth. And other species are getting smaller. And we could say, okay, so it's actually, if not all species are shrinking, then maybe everything is fine, because some species will get bigger, others will get smaller, so no problem, I mean, for fisheries. So maybe yes, but also not, because changes in species body sizes can have a big effect on the interaction. So we, for example, explored this question a while ago using an ecosystem model, Atlantis ecosystem model, where we had about 40 species included in the model. And basically what we asked is what happens if some species get smaller? So we forced 5 species in the ecosystem to slowly become smaller. Only 2 or 4% change in length over 50 years gradually made them smaller. And then we looked how the species interactions have actually changed. We found that just these small changes in length, so just here where I showed that changes in length are actually much bigger, just let's say 4% in length, could have up to 35% change in the biomass, most often decrease in the biomass. And also we found that these responses were quite different across species. So different colors here show different fishing levels. We explored these changes in body size under different fishing conditions, no fishing or fishing up to 0.6 of the instantaneous mortality rate. But we found basically that some species, when the 4% change in length happened, the biomass changed by, as I said, up to 35%. For other species, this didn't have much effect at all, or they even became more, the biomass became even increased. And the main reason for this is that changes in body length also have a big effect on natural mortality and species interactions. So for some species like flathead, small changes in body length had a huge effect, almost 50% change in natural mortality. Again, as I said, these different colors here show responses under different fishing levels. And again, there was a whole range of responses. For some species, mortality went down. For 4 out of 5 species, it went up. So that means that there will be a big change in the entire ecosystem and the way species interact. So the take-home messages is that temperature has a strong effect on realized body size, and that we should separate these different definitions of body size, whether we are talking about maximum, mean body size, or growth. Another message is that fish do not necessarily shrink with warming. Some appear to actually grow faster. And that these different temperature responses in different species may have a profound consequences on the food web and species interactions. Another thing is that acute and short-term experiments, where most of our data on how species will respond to temperature may not actually be adequate to understand climate change responses. We need long-term data. And the final one, please keep all old records and journals safe, because someone will need them. I will finish by acknowledging our funding from European Union funds investments in Lithuania. And if you want to know more about our research, you can go to our website at Sustainable Inland Fisheries. Thank you.